The US Senate has approved a plan to spend $1 trillion to fix the country's ailing infrastructure. It's also set the wheels in motion for allocating another $3.5 trillion for expanding health and social care support, tax breaks and climate initiatives. President Joe Biden says the bills will create millions of jobs and boost the economy. But as Mobin Nasir reports, both bills are likely to face opposition in the House of Representatives, and that could delay support for those who need it most.
Keeping business on track has been a roller coaster ride here at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. The theme park reopened in April after a year-long shutdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. Since then, Carl Rice, the company's president, has been on the fairgrounds alongside his staff because he says he can't find enough workers.
Initially, as we were reopening in early April, we were short-staffed, and that's still the case today. But when you're short-staffed, it's sort of all hands on deck, particularly when you're coming out of a pandemic and business is returning. We all were out there with our sleeves rolled up, working hard, side by side with some of our frontline staff.
Without enough hands on deck to run the whole park, the companies opted to operate only those rides that bring in the highest returns.
But I think we're going to be chasing labor or struggling to find enough labor for the remainder of the summer. So, thinking about opening all of our locations, I doubt we're going to get to a point where every single food ride is open. Rides we've focused on initially more so than some of our food locations.
Stimulus spending by the government has been a lifeline for many businesses and workers during the pandemic, and it's helped the US bounce back since the lifting of lockdowns and other social restrictions. But economists say much more needs to be done to provide enough jobs for Americans.
The breadth and extent of unemployment is still of a very large magnitude, and it's going to take a long time to bring all of those jobs back, even with the unprecedented growth that we're going to see this year.
Now the Senate has approved a $1 trillion infrastructure plan that it says will create employment and boost the economy. It includes $110 billion for building and repairing roads, bridges and highways in the country, $65 billion to help provide access to broadband internet services for millions of Americans, and $47 billion to ensure that infrastructure projects are congruent with environmental conservation goals.
This is a moment that lives beyond the headlines, beyond partisan sound bites, beyond the culture of instant outrage, disinformation, and conflict as entertainment. This is about us doing the real hard work of governing. It's about democracy delivering for the people. It's about winning the future. It's about doing our job. It's about building an economy from the bottom up and the middle out.
Senate Democrats also managed to pass a budget resolution for a further $3.5 trillion despite opposition from Republicans. That money will be spent on paid leave, childcare, education, healthcare, as well as on meeting the country's climate goals. But both spending plans are unlikely to be approved by the House of Representatives anytime soon. Until then, businesses facing hardships like the Santa Cruz Boardwalk will just have to ride it out on their own. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with Joseph Foodie, who joins us from New York. He's a professor of economics at the New York University's Stern School of Business. Good to have you back on the program, Professor. It really is a rare sight, isn't it, particularly in this political climate, that Republican senators have backed the Biden administration's $1 trillion infrastructure spending bill. What is it about these measures that did, in the end, win a broad bipartisan support?
Yeah, so what they essentially did is hived off the spending so that the least controversial pieces were in this $1 trillion plan. It's spread out over 10 years, and it's going to be invested in every state and every district in the country. And politicians always like money that they can tangibly see going back home. And then they've sort of put off the more contentious, politically trickier, problematic spending into this larger $3.5 trillion bill.
Yeah, let's talk about this larger bill, because in sharp contrast, the $3.5 trillion budget blueprint didn't receive a single Republican vote. Now, as we heard in that story, this essentially could change the social fabric in the US. It would greatly expand the social safety net in America right now. How significant is this? So we know it is just the first step in a long and arduous process, but if it does eventually get pushed through, what sort of impact will this have?
Yeah, so it will make a substantial difference, particularly to people on the lowest end of the income stream. And we're not sure exactly how it'll pass, but anything they get through, we know once you offer people a particular type of benefit, it tends to be really, really popular and persist. So Democrats feel like anything they can push through in the next year, even though this is just an annual budget, is likely to kind of continue in future. And so they're really sort of pushing as aggressively as they can, kind of realizing that they may have to walk back some pieces.
Yes, now both bills have been chalked up as a significant victory for the Biden administration. Do you think things might change perhaps when the House of Representatives changes its makeup at the midterm elections?
Yeah, so it's quite possible Democrats lose control of either or both houses, and that's part of the reason there's so much pressure to get this bill in now, thinking that it'll lead to some path persistence in future years. The piece in the infrastructure bill is all set, and that, as we saw, has broad approval. It's spending on construction in every politician's district in the country. So that'll persist no matter what. The real question are things like investments in climate change or support for families or medical assistance. Like, would that survive if Republicans take over one or both houses?
Okay, Professor Joseph Fudi, we will have to leave it there, but thank you so much again for joining us on the program.